to the recording. Okay, welcome everybody. This is the IOTA Community Governance Call on Tuesday, the 6th of November. I'm very happy that you all join in and are joining in. We are starting at time today because we have a guest and he has a quite interesting topic that will be very, very useful, I think, for us to listen in. His name is Firefly. He's of a project called DeFire, and the good thing is, as we are talking about the setting of a potential community grant committee, he and his team have applied to quite a lot of such programs in all kind of ecosystems in Web3 already. And so he agreed to share some experience and to be available for some questions from the community around what he has found and experienced in applying for such grants from the perspective of a builder, from a developer that basically needs funding to come to a new chain and to develop an application there. And so I will basically just give the word to him. He has prepared some slides, and so I'll stop sharing my screen and you can start.
Well, fantastic. Thanks, Philo, for the introduction. Yes, so my name is Firefly, or my handle is Firefly. Nothing to do with the wallet. I come from DeFi project. I'm one of the founders over there. Well, I believe we have the 6th of September, not November, as Philo said, but who knows?
Oh,
Maybe
yeah.
he is already in future.
Yeah, potentially.
Don't worry, don't worry. So basically, so we are building a project DeFire. I'll just to give you a perspective of what it is, so that also sets the context for our discussion about the grants. So what we do in DeFi, I mean, our objective is to build or offer a financial independence through DeFi, and we want to achieve that through like a seamless multi-chain ecosystem. So that already tells you, or kind of gives you a hint that we kind of have a quite a broad spectrum of possible partners we are and we will be collaborating with, and therefore, also the possibilities for grants for us are rather broad. It is going to be, I mean, the whole application is about low touch wealth optimization, launching later this year to start with our MVP. So the initial release will be available on Polygon with deposits from multiple different chains. But then soon we'll be expanding to other chains, and Shimmer will be one of them. Why we do that? I mean, we have identified multiple problems in DeFi. I mean, that's more like from the user perspective. So navigating in DeFi is complex. Investors are often financially illiterate. It's difficult. It's difficult to access optimal DeFi strategies. So we basically want to solve it by offering this low-touch DeFi ecosystem. Then, not to spend too much time on that, yeah, basically, just in a nutshell, the first protocol we're building will be called Blaze. It will basically automate how users can interact with DeFi. On the right-hand side, there'll be automated DeFi strategies on different chains. But to start with, as I said, will be Polygon. But the users can arrive from essentially any chain that is supported with a use of any token, and all the bridging and swapping into the actual strategy or the assets that are required will be handled by our protocol. So ultimately, this is where the whole automation happens. So we want to really eliminate that hustle from the user, and then offer them a seamless experience. So that was sort of a very short intro to what we are building, and then to actual grant. So as Philo mentioned, we have applied and still applying, and then looking for partnerships on different chains, and also different projects or protocols as well. Here, this is just a list of some that we have interacted with, we have applied for. As you can see, we have been already awarded a grant from Polygon DAO, and Aave is also DAO. Aave DAO, I should have mentioned that. So as I already mentioned, since we are building a protocol that operates on multiple chains, then the target sort of the target partners for us are multiple foundations, as in this case it's Polygon, it's Binance, it's Everlabs. Then also protocols itself, because those DeFi strategies that we are building, they often use other underlying DeFi protocols. In this case, for example, Aave on Polygon. So therefore, it made sense for Aave to also collaborate with our project and support our project. And the last group of grants, which is at the bottom, it is more like incubator VC DAOs that are sort of supporting different projects because, well, they see there is a good potential growth potential for engaging with such a project. So, I mean, we could group those grants into three categories. I mean, there are actual foundations that stand behind different blockchains. Then we have projects or protocols that we are collaborating with, and then lastly is the, let's say, VC incubator grants that focus solely on, let's say, the financial growth of the project itself. So, and then in terms of like general observations that we've had from going through multiple applications, most use some kind of form. Usually it's Airtable or similar form where you go through multiple steps, you fill it out, and then you apply. Usual questions in those forms. There is some kind of project one-liner or kind of high-level pitch about the project. There is team description, project description, obviously. Which then what is very obviously important, and also from your perspective as IOTA Foundation, and how the project benefits the organization or the foundation or whoever is giving the grant. This I believe is one of the more important questions, I would say, in such an application. General goals and visions, vision of the project, requested support. It's not always funds. Funds are usually great to have, but oftentimes, I mean, in our case, we actually appreciate equally or maybe even more like support with marketing, promotion, because usually those established chains or bigger project, they have much broader reach than we have, so can easily expose us to new users that we otherwise wouldn't be able to reach ourselves. So we actually appreciate that kind of support even probably more than financial one. Sometimes there is also support with some kind of vouchers. Projects or chains, they have partnerships with let's say, for example, auditing firm, where there would be a voucher granted to partially finance an audit, for example. And then lastly, there is usually some kind of KPIs requested, so key performance indicator to measure the or to follow up on the grant. The first of all is to justify the grant, whether the amount requested or the support requested makes sense in terms of the KPIs provided. And also then it will be a metric to use to follow up on those grants once awarded. Other things, yeah, usually KYC is not required, although Polygon Foundation or Polygon DAO does require KYC, so they've been an exception here. Yeah, usually there is a grant committee that assesses the application, and community gets involved above certain threshold. That's usually for the DAO grants. So DAO-driven grants like Polygon Foundation or Polygon DAO, sorry, or Aave DAO. Above certain level, the grant, the request, or if it is about financial support, that would go to that will be subjected to a DAO vote if the amount is significant. Then some kind of lessons learned of, at least from my perspective, being a builder. Usually the contact to the teams behind those grants is rather hard. I mean, it's really difficult to reach out to them to follow up on the request or on the application to hear what's the process, what the status. So definitely, I mean, building a platform would be certainly good to focus for you guys to offer some kind of way to communicate what is the status of the application, for example. Justification, so behind the decision, whether a rejection or acceptance, or whether it is acceptance. So what is then, for instance, the support provided, whether it's the requested support or it's adjusted. The justification is often missing. So it seems that it's very standardized process for those teams working on those grants, and so that is definitely something that teams like ours definitely appreciates. Feedback from those committees, since it's also valuable for us to know how we can improve it, for future collaboration. So requirements, in those applications sometimes are not compatible with the offered support. So just to give an example, some of the grants programs, they require, for instance, an audited smart contract code. But the program is kind of intended for protocols that are still building and developing the application. So there is clearly, the compatibility is not there, right? If you request, audited code, but you sort of try to support builders that are coming to your chain, for instance. And then the follow up on the process. So let's say after the grant is given, is also often seldom. So the grant is awarded, and then it was more like, then it's like back to this KPI. So what is really, I mean, how are they used for kind of following up on the actual grant, or the team who received the grant? Because I understand that the grant committee has a certain objective to scrutinize those applications, to screen through them, to and then to award or decline the request. But then there is the question, what happens next? I mean, yeah, as I said, I mean, financial support is great for projects that are building. I mean, it's I haven't met a project that is building and doesn't need more funds. That's that's normal. That project needs funds, but there is also other support that is very nice to have. As I said, those promotion, marketing, perhaps some advice, technical advice. So if some kind of a way to continue that dialogue with, let's say, the team that has been onboarded or given a grant, not just, oh, that's one time payment and, well, we'll talk another month, let's see how you're doing with your KPIs, some more like ongoing follow-up. That will also be definitely great, because this is what teams like ours definitely need. So that was sort of my kind of hopefully brief observations and then feedback, at least from what we've experienced so far. So yeah, now open to questions and discussion.
Wow.
Oh.
No, go.
But I mean, like for example, for Moonwell, we were trying to get grants from Aurora Labs and Near Foundation. So one of the things that people don't usually realize, especially if you can get in contact with their grant team, is sometimes the grants are, even though they're not really stated explicitly that they're like turned off or like they're not accepting anymore at the moment. There's sometimes they do, which is nice, but other times it's very ambiguous as to whether people are accepting and reviewing things still. And sometimes the review takes 1 to 3 weeks for especially for Aurora Lab specifically.
Yeah, I found it also really interesting to hear that. First of all, I mean, that kind of sounds like a bit of the anti thing that you actually would want to have as first of all as a builder that replies grant, because if you have trouble to get in contact, you don't get feedback, you don't get follow up, you're basically kind of being dropped money and then left in the wild if you are accepted, or if you're not accepted, you're not even getting proper feedback on that. And also for a community or for a DAO that supports such a grant program, basically it sounds like that's not actually what you want to have. And I'm questioning myself, is this either because they are too busy, too many grant applications, they're understaffed basically, or is it maybe because they are kind of have so huge treasuries that they're kind of not really need to care about every dollar that they spend that is really.
Yeah, yeah, it's probably both, I would say, right? I mean, depends on the
There's
project.
definitely a mixture of, it depends. Like if an NFT project was an example, sometimes they get funding just randomly, and they could be the most useless thing. It really just depends. There's people who are reviewing those grants can have a variety of opinions. There are huge teams usually. In like 10 people, and there's just consistently reviewing grants every day basically. So this probably I'm luckily friends enough, good enough friends with the people from Aurora Labs to know who their head of grant reviewer is basically. But it's interesting, like it's a wholly different process than I would ever expect people to do. It's just not really logical. It's just they get flooded with hundreds of applications every week.
Is
Yeah,
this
I would just have it if it's okay. I mean, I would say that is also about probably the clarity of objectives that are set
Mhm.
for, let's say, for the grant committee from, let's say, IOTA Foundation in this case, right? So perhaps there should be equal focus on in terms of objectives. All right. Well, obviously you have to identify projects. You have to provide them with whatever support you're available to provide, but another objective should be, well, I mean, we also have to kind of onboard those projects and provide them with this ongoing support. So it's not, as you just Pilo mentioned, just there it is,
yeah.
a pile of cash, and then I mean, good luck, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's really.
What kind of support are you speaking about? Just for my understanding.
Sorry, can you say it again?
What kind of support would you wish for?
So building a project, I mean, you need like yeah, well, I would say two things outside of obviously financing. I mean, you definitely need to kind of marketing, right, assistance. So kind of help you kind of utilize in this example, I mean, IOTA Foundation and their market presence, their social media, presence to help promote the project, because ultimately, the project, if the project gets traction, it
Dat is al het
attracts.
werk, hè? Je denkt toch niet dat ik elke keer alleen maar vrij heb?
Dennis, I'll mute you.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
I was like, I couldn't really comment on that. I was like,
No.
I was very angry with your opinion.
oh no, that's okay. Well, it's absolutely fine. So what I was saying, yeah. So marketing and promotion, because launching a new project, I mean, you need to get traction, and once you get traction, it obviously benefits your project, but also benefits the underlying chain, right? Because then there is more. There are the chain gets busier, right? And then it's obviously the desired outcome for a chain. And the other support is I would say technical, in terms of to have developers that are familiar, or well, that are developers of the chain, to be able to assist and advise on certain technical applications that you need to solve once you are kind of building a project on for a given chain. So yeah, I would say, I mean, these two definitely, that would be great. Also, I mean, if you have people who are able to do so, I mean, introduction, let's say, or matchmaking with other projects,
Yeah.
with let's say other investors, like larger, like VCs, for instance, if that is also needed for a given project. So I would say, yeah, those things. I mean, we could even go beyond that. Things like even helping with, I don't know, I mean, you struggle with finding your brand identity. Perhaps you have great skills inside IOTA Foundation who graphical designers, brand designers who could. So there is, a multitude of.
Is me gone or is he gone?
He sometimes has an issue with his mic sometimes.
Yeah, but he's
yeah,
there. But I mean, that sounds.
May I add my 2 cents?
Is to solve.
Yeah, Mark.
So.
Oh, there he is again. So I fully agree. Besides the financial part, ideally we could provide someone with network access. I mean, to the network, so the contacts, knowledge. But then when we move in this direction, it's more like not a grant program, but like an accelerator, which means you can't really scale. So you would basically 2 different strategies. Do you want to do like quality grants / acceleration, I guess? Or do you want to throw out a lot of money to build us and let them build and provide here and there maybe sometimes expertise, because you will not be able to scale. Otherwise, you have all the IOTA Foundation members just helping other projects.
So yeah, but this is how I had actually a very nice short explainer given to me by Aurora, one of the Aurora staff in NEAR. They have 4 streams, thinking broad categories. Co-marketing, intro to projects in the ecosystem that they directly affiliate with. The grants, obviously. Intro to venture capitalists and other investors within the ecosystem, as well as and this is how they generally do it, rather than the liquidity incentives and other kind of personnel staffing, they let that handle by proximity labs. So I guess their equivalent would be like Touchpoint almost. In the IOTA. So the grant team handles the grants and getting up the money, and I'll just use Touchpoint in this case. The Touchpoint would basically handle the community building and networking and figuring out who needs what.
Yep, that's basically also how we do it, kind of. So we push projects that are interested in, I don't know, let's say marketing, finding their brand, or anything in that regard, push them to Touchpoint.
And this is basically an interesting point for us, because we have these two focuses now. We have the community grants, which we are here, and then we have the other thing. But basically, it would always be interesting. Like you also mentioned stuff like coupons and things like this for audits, and this is also something basically that might be a really interesting point for us to take into an account, that instead of only offering pure financial advice over grants, that we could also offer this audit slots. Because I know we have some connections to, basically we have this offer of people that kind of would have audit slots available for community projects, and we basically kind of could book something like a monthly budget or like a quarterly budget of a couple of audits with them, and then we basically could then distribute them from the community grants program to projects that are even more interested in such a support than maybe direct financial thing. And that's a really good point to keep in mind. Then we could even, the other thing would then also be kind of to provide a funnel or an introduction into Touchpoint. Because we cannot, we cannot guarantee, because it's still then the point of the Touchpoint team. But of course, a project that is kind of checked and supported by the community through community grant can then, of course, also be directed into the Touchpoint program, because where they get additional support, which might be especially if you say it, you miss this in a lot of other projects or in a lot of other programs where you kind of feel a little bit left alone. So it's basically a very strong USP actually for IOTA and IOTA Foundation and our system of supporting builders to have something like this available. That's actually a really good point for us, I think.
Yeah. Well, it totally is. That's how I got. I mean, this is how DeFire got in. I guess he could tell the story.
Yeah, let him. But he has only 5 minutes, so yeah.
No, I just wanted to say, definitely have a look at Polygon Village. I don't know if you have already explored their website, but they basically have those multiple tracks or different tracks or paths for offering support. They have like something they call a welcome voucher. I don't know what that's about, but there is something for your project. There is clearly the grant, so let's financial support. they have like Village Wonders, which is their kind of acceleration program, 3 months acceleration program I can see. So that they have like those 3 different tracks that they offer. It could be, something for you as well to look into, to kind of explore those different tracks, because I mean, definitely, the good thing about vouchers or coupons, at least from, your perspective, organization that will be giving those grants out, is that, well, you have a full control how those funds are spent.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You
While
know already for what you pay, basically. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, giving cash or let's say stable coin, there is always a risk that those funds are spent in a different way than what was, promised in the application, right? So that is that. Obviously, it's you never can kind of expect that, because there's also a difficulty of those applications and applying as a team. You try to specify those KPIs, but oftentimes, it's because you're still in a sort of dealing with a startup environment, right? So those goals, objectives, KPIs, even though you try to anticipate them and try to define them as well as good as possible, there is always this kind of unknown element that, well, what you thought you will be having as a KPI a month ago when you applied for a grant, well, today it looks different, right? And then it's, you're still building, you're still trying to meet your ultimate objective, but the KPI that you presented a month ago might be obsolete today, for instance, right? So there is also that element of this. So I think, ultimately, probably there should be like flexibility on both ends, the builder and also the grant committee, in terms of, obviously, when there is a follow-up on those KPIs, there is this flexibility, right? Yeah, of course, the KPI looks maybe different today, but it still meets the ultimate objective of, let's say, how this project benefits IOTA Foundation.
Did you have the chance to go into such discussions after an applied grant with around your KPIs, or have you just been basically you just submit, okay, this is where we are now, and then you got the next milestone payment or something like this?
Yeah. So I would say it is very standardized how those, at least from our experience, how those grants are handled, because it's probably, simply those teams are understaffed, so they have full focus on evaluating and giving grants away, but they don't have capacity to follow up on them. I think that's probably my best guess why there is not so much, or not sufficient follow up, you could say.
Yeah. That's really good. That's really good to hear. That's like something we need to think about in setting this up, because I would basically nearly think about having a bit of someone that is really focusing on all this follow-up and secondary tasks that are, like I said, it's that you will have a couple of people that only review grants, but you will really also need to make builders stay in an ecosystem. You will have to follow up with them and basically keep them engaged and engage with them, because then you will create an ongoing value proposition for them. Otherwise, they will just look out for the next grant program and the next ecosystem where they can farm the next grant. If there is nothing left over behind you, you deployed your app and you received your grant, and there's nothing more of value left for you there, there's no much need for staying there. Your app runs, you can
with depreciation.
Yeah, I definitely agree. You want to retain those good projects, right? That they keep developing and building.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, so that was the short presentation I had for today. So sorry, I will have to run now, but I hope it was insightful. That it gave you some sort of ideas about how you could go about the org. And I'll be happy to to follow up and to have continued discussion with you, Pilot, if you need some more input on that.
Yeah, we thank a lot. We had already a great talk in our first. I really appreciate you doing this and bringing this info to us. It was great to see it from the other side, and I think we have picked up some really interesting points here that we haven't put into enough thoughts into it currently. So that's really valuable, I think, for us to maybe really develop a better grant program than some others are using. Yeah, so hop on. Whenever you have time, feel free to join our calls again or stay active in the channel and in the chat. Looking forward to what comes with
Yeah.
your project.
Yeah, I mean, you're welcome to ping me here in the conversation under governance. I will then respond to those messages.
Yeah.
Perhaps I'm not the most active person here in the governance because I have 1,000 other things to attend to, unfortunately. But definitely I'll be coming back and then replying to questions or follow up discussions if there are happening here. So yeah, well, have fun discussing it further, and thanks for listening to me.
All right.
Thank you for presenting.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Very interesting, huh? Let's ask into
Yeah,
into
definitely.
the audience. Yeah, what do you think about that? What can we take out of this?
So for me, there's no really new learning, just that the grant aftercare should maybe have actually someone actively pursuing this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's
maybe one
also
really reaching out.
yeah, that's also what I kind of took from that. That maybe it's
But
good if there are regular reviews, like when you get grants, then you like regularly talk back, like how's your status at the moment or so.
yeah, so how we use it in the EDF is basically because they are dependent, the grantees are dependent on the payout. They basically approach us with the milestone, right, when they have done it. So basically, they report back, and at that point in time, you see the quality of work. You generally talk, and if there's time, you have regular checkups. But maybe there's benefit in actively reaching out. That's true.
Mm.
We should look into that.
I would.
I'm sorry. Please go on.
No, go ahead. Apologies.
No worries, no worries. So from my side, I completely agree with the idea of keeping or trying to keep teams in the ecosystem. The question is always in what direction and how, in the sense of that if a team is, let's say, highly specialized in building a wallet, a node software, or some kind of DApp, which is DeFi, for them to switch to a completely new DApp, which is now identity oriented, which might not let's say, attract their interest in really building that, it might be really hard. So also there, I mean, I completely understand to keep the talent because they now understand technology and know how to use it. But if it is a close-knit team that knows how to work together and they build this really nice, let's say, decentralized exchange, for them to shift to a completely different use case and scenario might not be as motivating and as interesting. So there is also a big question from my side to understand how to keep them in the ecosystem if, let's say, they're really good at doing one thing while now the market needs something different. This is what the question that pops up in my mind.
I see it more as a community building kind of thing. So you just stay in touch with the grantees. By staying in touch, you understand their problems, their needs, and maybe you also see opportunities because you know the other grantee is looking for something similar. So maybe there is like synergy or some of your contacts, yada yada. And out of that, you kind of build this small family that stays together, which is beneficial for everybody. Win-win.
Yeah, and this is
So
really
yeah,
that's really what Touchpoint basically. I think it's
Exactly.
great that we have set up Touchpoint like this. It's good to hear such a feedback that is stuff like this is missing in other ecosystems. That's definitely a very important highlight for us that we have it already.
So yeah, I mean, Touchpoint this should be one of the parts that played up the most. Like that's how DeFire got in here. I was because I was part of their project before, and let's do this just randomly because I talked to Christian quite a bit, one of the admins of Touchpoint, and I introduced them DeFire to Touchpoint, and it was easy to get them onboarded and get them into it, and they got the help they needed. It's one of the best parts of the IOTA ecosystem, especially for projects. because like I don't know if anyone here has ever tried to apply for Binance, grants in any way, but it's not fun. Just suffice to say. But yeah, so I mean, easiest is like Collectiverse and DeFire joined quite easily when I introduced them, and then also another one is I don't even know what I'm allowed to say. Now, the design studio is basically coming into Touchpoint as well. It's easy to get the people that in Touchpoint and talk to the staff just because they're affable and easy to deal with. So it's definitely one of the best parts of IOTA ecosystem. Should definitely be played up a bit more, and at least if the grant team's too busy to they're reviewing grants and trying to determine what's value to IOTA. The touch point can pretty much go out and keep in touch and see what they need.
Yeah. I think we
By the
need.
way, can you elaborate on what Binance is doing wrong?
Oh, do you want me to? Okay. So if
Like a summary, you don't need to go into detail.
Oh no, sorry. Maybe I was going to. Basically, if you apply, it's as a normal grant almost, but there's always this transactional behavior you have to deal with, which is basically you need to have a certain amount of TVL, or you need like 10 million or like 20 million to talk to them, basically.
Okay, gotcha.
So they're not even considering any newcomer projects. They're only
Unless you have like a storied team, you could be one of the most innovative devs, but if you have nothing to really show for it, if you're like, even if you're in Web 2, like it's all about they're a company. They're not a foundation, or they have that nonprofit entity for tax purposes. But besides that, they're fully functional centralized exchange entity.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's a few really good, I really had a great time with dealing with the Near and Aurora teams because they're just easy to work with. The easier and more seamless you make it for builders to get help they need, the more likely you attract better talent.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, what I sometimes think, of course, like Antonio said, and also Mark said, it's difficult to scale. Yeah. So I'm, of course, in the moment, Touchpoint can handle what we have here. I don't know. We have how many projects we have there in a moment in Touchpoint? 60 or something like that. So that's already. But let's imagine you have 600 teams building there. Yeah. So you really would need to scale up such a project and such a program, and this costs a lot of money because you then basically
you could also, I mean, this happens all the time in various real life organizations. You can also get your people who affiliate with you or volunteer to actively partake without directly increasing the burden on the foundation members themselves.
Yeah. This is then something the community. I mean, this is the good thing when you have a strong community like us, and you can get them involved in such things because they can take on, and they will happily normally take on such things like staying in contact, being available for developers, because we have a lot of knowledgeable devs in the community already. So this can then grow, and when people are when stuff is growing and they get some incentives to really take care about such project, that really makes sense. Pretty cool. Anybody else? Anything around what we've been hearing from DeFire currently? One thing was maybe what I remember. I mean, like he really mentioned it, that the KIC thing is. I think he only got it from one. Yeah. So only Polygon DAO required any KIC. Maybe that's still depending sometimes on the amount. I know that
it usually is.
Yeah, I know I know how much they asked. It's not something above 100K, because I think above 100K you will have in most of the projects definitely in KIC. But for the smaller grants, very often it seems to be handled easy going, and then you don't also have follow up and things. I mean, I think basically a lot of this is happening in projects where you have these huge treasuries. Yeah, so if you have 3, 4, 500 million treasuries like Aave, and then somebody asks for 20K, yeah, and then you have 500 applications, they all ask for 20K, you can't really follow up deeply on that. Yeah, so
I
but
think the minimum for just throwing out money, it's not the technical term, but
mhm.
is around like anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000 for Ave or
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and in Aave you see it. They have the majority of the grants they give out is something below 25, below 30. So the most stuff is like 7, 8, 9, 10K, smaller grants. They give them out pretty fast, and yeah, then you have this. Yeah, you give out 7, 8, or 8K. So, but then you also don't have investing people another 10 hours of follow up over the next 2-3 months for such a project. Yeah, um, sure they are more careful with if they spend 2 or 300K on a project, they are much more follow up. But for the smaller things, very likely you don't have the capacity to continuously do this directly from the grant committee. But this can be something then if you have something like Touchpoint and if you have a strong community that takes care of such builders, that might be the better way for them. Yeah.
You also could do something like I posted in the chat itself. There's this, there's a lot of things you don't even realize exist out there. Like I guess would be the best thing to call a grant aggregator, I guess.
Mhm.
So this thing called D-Work, they have bounties from various projects that
Yeah.
post on their thing. It looks like a Trello almost. But either way, they have grants, big grant list from like Crow and Oasis and all the other things that are in there. They give you the forms and the intake forms, and you can just fill them out as you need to.
Yeah, and then if stuff is happening from such aggregators anyway, it's complicated because I don't even know if you then directly get in contact or if they handle stuff like this. This is also very likely a problem for such grant programs if you have these aggregators and they basically lead all kind of applications towards you have to really scroll through to find the genuine applications that make sense for your project. Otherwise, you just get flooded with all kind of requests and stuff. So it might really be a quite difficult task if you get into the business of giving out grants especially in a bigger region where it's really popular and you have a real big grant program running, and basically the whole world will jump onto it and apply for that. Yeah. Okie dokie. What else? We still have. So I think, like I said, this will be things we can really keep into account. I will put maybe some ideas up in the document what we are working with. What else is happening in our community grant thing? Basically, we have, if you haven't seen it yet, we have over the weekend we put 2 new topics up in our governance forum. Like we have discussed it in the last meeting on Thursday, I wanted to get a bit input from also from the community outside this group on like the most important things that we are currently need to solve to then move into a state where we can apply those things and easily work on the details of a program. And I think for all it's pretty clear mission statement is one of the most important things because this fixes and defines basically the outer limits or the framework for what we are doing. And so currently there is this thread and this poll up in the governance forum. If you had not yet have the chance to look into it and to give your opinion in the poll, I'll ask you please to go to govern.iota.org and just read through its short texts and give a vote in the poll. And the other one, if you have some opinions on guiding principles, just really comment in the forum and use the forum as expected. If you want to add some opinions there, would be really good. Currently, this is like it now, yeah. So that's also a bit of what we have been talking about in the last meeting on Thursday, where we talked about if it makes sense to have IOTA in the mission statement or not. And so currently it looks like the thing that we have also been talking about in the last meeting is currently favored. But of course, let's see how over the next couple of days, if there are more votes are coming in. Let's see how it looks on Thursday. But potentially on Thursday, we could maybe come to a decision here in the group that we basically go with the one that is most favored here. From my opinion, like I said, it makes sense to have it like that. Also to focus on calling it a community committee grant program instead of a treasury, which will be a bit. I struggle to define it as a treasury. Yeah, so I would rather call it on what it really is, because it's a grant program, it's a grant committee. It doesn't need to handle or care about the whole Shimmer community treasury, which is basically, if we want to have something working rather soon than late, and where we don't need to put in too many factors and define too many things that are maybe out of the scope of such a program, I think we should really work on defining a working grant committee and define what is needed to have this committee be voted in, and then operating with a budget from the treasury that will make it easier for us to focus on what is really needed and to come to an earlier point where we might get operational with this whole thing. Any opinions, comments on these different mission statement options? No, everybody quiet. Okay. Then we also last week talked about the guiding principles. And guiding principles, I think, are a great way, because if you imagine you are a grant reviewer and you, like we figured out, you get maybe really flooded by quite a lot of applications every day. You need a way to quickly sort out things that that you don't need to take a deeper look into it. Yeah? So, and if you have these application forms and you basically, as a developer, you have to answer some questions and you have to provide some basic information. This needs to be tailored so that the grant reviewer basically can very quickly make a basic decision if this is something that is interesting and needs to be looked into further, or if it is something that goes directly into the bucket, because you can directly define that it's not following the guiding principles. Yeah, and so guiding principles should be really something where you can say, okay, is it supported? Is it in the guiding principles, or is it out? And if it's out, you don't even need to look further into it. You just really discard it, because it doesn't meet the criteria the community has set for their grants. And so basically you don't need to, let's say, waste more time on such a thing. And so then I think we have defined some really good ones already, and so of course the thing with the relevance to the Shimmer network, we talked about the last time also if we should put IOTA here also. I left it out now because kind of IOTA will have its own treasury, and it might make things more complicated if you have IOTA there. And then, of course, the second one is clear all stuff that would go against something like this with discrimination or stuff like that. It's out. Also, I think the number 3 is really important for us. We absolutely have currently not yet any idea how large the community treasury will really be. Yeah? It really depends on the market valuation of Shimmer and on the growth of Shimmer market cap over the next couple of months after they've launched, if there would be really sufficient large funds available to distribute to builders and projects. And so I think the grant committee, especially in the beginning, will need to be a bit picky on selecting the projects that really have an extremely high or seem to be able to make a really high impact on the ecosystem. Because if you see that you might only be able in the first year, really depending on how the market is, if we're still in the bear market, maybe in the first year you can only finance 15 projects. If you have a bad scenario. And then you really need to be very cautious on the quality that you fund. Now, of course, if you have enough funds to fund 100 projects a year, you still need to prioritize things, but you have a wider range and you can also take a bit more risky approach because on some things it might really not be clear and it might really be very, very difficult to figure out what's the real value of such a project if it lifts off in the ecosystem. And so it's a difficult job for grant reviewers, I think. But having this as a guiding principle is a clear guideline for the grant reviewers that they have to always take this into account and put thought into this. How much is really the impact of such a project that we support, and especially the impact also to the related funds. If you spend 200K on something and in the end you can think about it, the market cap of Shimmer might potentially only rise 1 million and it brings 100 new users, that's maybe not the good relation. And so having this as a guiding principle to look for projects with the highest possible impact for the whole ecosystem, I think that just makes sense. Any comments? Any objections? No?
Not really an objection, but just saying positive impact can also be without direct value to the market cap, right?
Yeah.
Something that builders can work on and provide value, hence for the ecosystem.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think highest impact is really something. It can also be, like you said, it doesn't need market cap. It can also be really better usability. If somebody is building a great public good, a dashboard or stuff like this. This is not stuff that you can measure in financial
growing the awareness.
Growing awareness, bringing new people in the ecosystem, into the community, even just having a contest that makes fun in the community. But I think, of course, you can only, like I said, if you can only fund 10 or 12 projects, you might need to skip some of those not so easy to evaluate things. That's the thing. Really depends on most of the decisions here depend on the size of the funding that will be available. Number 4, projects that can guarantee a backflow of capital investment into the community treasury will be evaluated more positively. I think this is something that we have heard from a lot of people in the community, from wherever we are in the groups and the discourse and the Telegram groups, and talk about these ideas. It's always the community wants to see some backflow either into the treasury to keep the treasury sustainable, so that's basically the value goes down slower, or it can even come to a point where it sustains itself and stays on the level, even grows potentially. So if a project can offer some side effects besides being a cool project and bringing new users and potentially growing the market cap, but also could offer to have maybe a couple of project tokens distributed to the treasury, or airdropping tokens to the community, things like this. I think we need to then a little bit more define that, but that's what we heard from the community. Everybody will be happy that for projects that can offer something like this, they share whatever 0.5% of their tokens to the treasury. And so a little bit priority should be given to such projects in the grant evaluation. Nobody objecting? I mean, it's like I have a bit of a, I don't know, I'm not 100% happy with it. Because for some projects it just is not possible. Yeah, of course, if you don't have a token and things like this, then you cannot give back. So I think we can maybe work a bit on the wording here to not exclude really good projects because they don't have a direct positive financial backflow into the treasury. Maybe we could really also include some other softer factors here that might be useful. Maybe some projects can, besides launching the application, maybe they can also commit to some education sessions or yeah. So I think we can maybe positive impact can mean a lot of things. I think not just financial.
Yeah, I agree. Because when it depends on the project and how early it is. If they have no funds, they may be using every last cent
Yeah.
to get the project going, right? So, love the intent of keeping the treasury evergreen, but it's for some projects it's really almost impossible. So but like you said, building in a return can be not just
Yeah.
financial, some other measurements, and or it could perhaps say we could build in some type of concept of once you reach profitability or something like that, then we would expect repayment, right? So if they never reach profitability, then they never have to give it the funds. But once they start seeing, and maybe we could work some type of verbiage in like that.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah.
I would also like to add something in that, guys. I do understand that they want to see something in return for it. And I was thinking also from my perspective, it could be like you have different situations, right? One of the situations that we are talking about in our own group or in our own team is like we need also something for bug hunting. So you could also bring that treasury for bug hunting towards the Shimmer treasury or to the treasury. And also what could be done is like, okay, if you send over a portion of the tokens or whatever you want to give, maybe in some certain projects or for us, certainly, it would be best if you can say, okay, this is what we give back, and maybe you can attach new commerce towards the project that already have been reinvested again. That should also maybe be something that you should be thinking about.
Yeah.
Does it make sense?
Yeah. I understand what you mean. Yeah.
You could, action items perhaps like evangelizing or working, maybe working shows or doing so many meetups or something, promoting the cause, not just for their project, but for other ones. So, that might be another way to
Maybe we
contribute.
could, if you think about this in an like if you design like an application form for a grant, you could basically put in a question, something like this. You could really ask, okay, besides delivering your product, what else can you offer for the ecosystem? Yeah, something like this.
Yeah, how can you help us expand our base or market it? Yeah.
If somebody puts in something there and it's interesting, it's going to be something. Oh yeah, the grant reviewer will say, yeah, that sounds cool. If there's nothing, it's also not a problem. If some projects just can't say something now,
Right.
or then it shouldn't be an issue. But if there's a project that can offer something really interesting additionally to building a great product and developing a nice application or making a nice event or YouTube, whatever. So if somebody can offer something more, we should be open for listening to such things and take this into evaluation.
And perhaps added incentives, which might be like, okay, we want to be connected to another chain. We want to establish a relationship with another chain. If you do that, there's another 5% for you, or that could be your payment, something like that. So things that actually grow our presence in other ecosystems and just at large.
Yeah, I think we can work this a little bit more out in detail. Too much detail is also sometimes difficult. I would also always give there really some room for the grant reviewers to just really look into, because every project is really specific and different, and so it just should be a part of the thought process in such a review thing, to think about, okay, what else is the value that such a project can bring in. If they can commit to some additional value for the ecosystem, it should be definitely put as a positive point in the evaluation if you basically grant some funds to such a project. Okay, cool. Maybe point 5, the proposer team must be capable of delivering the proposed project. Evaluating this is the responsibility of the committee. Sounds kind of clear, but is of course difficult, because sometimes it might be really difficult to be able and capable to evaluate if somebody can do this. So there's a lot important things are really, is a team known? Did they build something similar or even the same project already on another application, on another chain? Are they completely unknown and they have not even a history on GitHub for something? So this is basically depends on the grant reviewers how good they can figure out if a project really will be able to be capable to deliver this. But definitely the reviewers will need to look into this. Potentially for larger grants, I would even say they kind of will need to document that. So basically, okay, these are the reasons why we believe, or these are the things that we have checked and seen that make us believe that this project will be able to deliver. So we kind of can work on a process that also puts the committee members on a secure position, that they really can say if there are some complaints from the community or from the ecosystem later on, that, okay, guys, this is really what I've checked. They presented their project here. We have checked their GitHub. We have checked their Discord history, and they are So I think it's good for a grant reviewer, especially if it's a little bit larger grants, to be spent, that to have such a documented process where you can really also show that you did your due diligence in checking if such a project deserves the funding.
Yeah, it makes sense. You want to have some documentation that shows that some due diligence was done, right? Yeah.
6, we also talked a little bit about this in the last one. The requested budget must match the industry standards for comparable tasks. If a proposal requests way above fair market value, the committee may either reject the proposal or cut the funding to settle at the fair market value. Also something that is desirable, let's say it like this, but also difficult, I think, for the committee. But it needs to be. If you request a grant for 75K for something and you ask around 2-3 other teams that have experience in something like this, and say if we would build it, it would potentially have 25 or 30K costs for this. Then you can't give them 70K for something that is clear not worth that. And so then you either have to ask them to go down with the expectation, or you're just declining it. Yeah. So, but I think it's good to have this in the guiding principles so that it's clear for builders that they can't ask for all kind of fairy tale numbers. Job of the committee will be to make sure that it's not overspending community funds for stuff that can others build cheaper or better, or that are really just not fair settled. Yeah.
That's also, by the way, one question you need to think about is the different cost, right? Because if you think about the United States and the cost to develop and market something there, it's of course way higher than
Yeah.
other places. Yeah. At the
Yeah,
same time, you want to build out the presence in the United States now, right? So there could also be a combination of saying, hey, we support projects that have maybe a lot of their development
Yeah.
resources outside of the United States, but you drive awareness for them to G-Man's point, in the United States for these projects.
Yeah, this is why I think you have to, if you frame it like this with a fair market value, basically this would be the also the location based on that. Yeah, if of course a team from the US, the developer costs there are just like ridiculous high, you can't compare them with what would it cost if you develop it in India or in whatever. Yeah. So, but then you really would need to compare it to the US market for similar applications. And then if you see, okay, they fit generally in what is paid and requested in the industry there for the US crypto developer industry or something like that, then it makes sense. Yeah. But yeah, if a project from Sri Lanka or from wherever, from a very low cost basis country requesting similar funding or the same funding that it would cost to develop this in the USA, then there's a mismatch. Yeah, and then the grant committee will need to step in and figure out where is a settlement possible at a fair market price. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a judgment call here, right? It's venue and also competency,
Yeah.
right? So there are definitely, when you evaluate projects, some teams are just simply better than others, right? And the quality is much higher. So sometimes the paying a little bit more for those quality teams actually saves you money because they don't have to do a bunch of redos, which
And
then just costs
they can deliver.
right?
Yeah. And that's like I said,
And if you want access to capital, then you also want to have US-based project, and you want to tap into the US financial industry. Then maybe you want to also help projects that are incorporated somewhere else to relocate to the United States, for example, because many investors will not invest in a country, in a company that's not US-based because they, because of legal issues and they don't feel
legal,
comfortable.
political, just accountability, project management scenarios. You know, it just depends on. But everyone's a case by case basis.
Yeah,
truly.
it's always case by case, and then really needs to be decided by the committee if that makes sense. Yeah, and if a team is, like I said, it's if you know they are winners, they are a big one. They have this already deployed to 7. Like they run on Solana, they run on Polygon. They're one of the top apps there. They are expensive, but you know it's going to be delivered on time. They are
project
secure.
management skills, right? And
Yeah.
deliverable. Do they hit their deliverables? And and you know they're understandable as far as how close are they in the time frames.
And if
as
it's something that is really desirable to have, and I mean, then we anyway will be in a region where this is not only a decision of the grant committee anymore. There will be then a community vote if it's above 100 or 200K, and then it's the grant committee will evaluate this. They will give their opinion, but then they will the final decision on such big projects will then be by the community in a vote. But if the grant committee, of course, evaluates this and says, okay, green light from our side, we would love to have them building. It all looks great, and I think then the community can decide. But of course, if they said no, we don't want to spend money on that, in the end, it's the final decision has to be on the community for this large fund spending. Another important point, because especially for us, you have two grant-giving entities in the ecosystem. Yeah, so you will have the community, and you will have the Swiss Tangle Ecosystem Association with Mark. Of course, if they have already received funding from the Swiss entity for the same thing, then they cannot request it again from the community. What could be done is, of course, okay, they have, let's say, they have received already a fund from the Swiss entity for their basic application, but now they want to do an extension or something, and now they come to the community and ask for this. Yeah, and if it's a different scope of work, an addition to already existing project or things like this, something that has not been paid yet from another funding institution, then of course it can be done. But if
New
it's
functionality.
new
Real, new
functionality,
functionality.
yeah, and so it's important that those two grant systems always work close together, yeah, so that there's a good contact between the Swiss Association and the community grant committee, so that they basically always know what are the others already funding or which projects have applied to the other. So I really think about to have like a communication channel somewhere where basically
Yeah, that's actually interesting.
yeah.
It's a good point, right? Because should the project share a common database, just of projects that have been submitted, so that they
I think
because
I think
I don't know if it's
basically, yeah.
possible, but
I think, yeah. I mean, it doesn't need to maybe be complete in detail and something, but
right,
having, and it's also not something that needs to be public totally, yeah.
right.
But it needs to be something that, let's say the lead of the grant committee and Mark or something like this, they should be in close contact and share this information, because it's
Yeah,
important
at least
that
maybe at a minimum, the name of the project and the name of the team members that are applying,
yeah,
right? And
yeah.
that's it.
Yeah, so you
That
can
could
easily
double check.
you can easily look up, okay, are they already in the process with the others? They already, or maybe they have been
Yeah.
declined by the others. Also then interesting maybe to talk about why they have been declined. And yeah, so this definitely there needs to be a shared communication between these two systems that we have.
So that also brings up a point that, which is should, in my opinion, it should be okay if we have two different sources of funding, right?
Yeah.
So it should be okay if a team is rejected in one group but could get approved in the other, right? I
Yeah.
mean, they should, unless that was for some reason that
Mhm.
nefarious. If the project was turned down for some unscrupulous type action
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah, but I would not exclude this when I say, okay,
Right.
you've been declined by the community, you are not able to get something from the EDF either, because there might be different objectives, there might be different principles
Perspectives,
attend,
right.
and so of course, and they could even, I mean, if they apply to both of the systems to the same time, this can lead to some confusion. But again, this is then also something, there needs to be some communication then between community grants and Swiss Foundation. Potentially, really, as I say, okay, Swiss Foundation says it's a super complex technical thing. We have maybe better resources on the dev side to do a follow up with this. Okay, we take that, and yeah, so I think good communication between these two systems will be super important to have a frictionless running system, and a couple
Yeah,
of
and I think
rules. Yeah,
I think it would. It's not unrealistic to expect, like if I'm applying for a project, and I'm looking for funding, right?
Mhm.
I'm going to probably apply to both.
Yeah.
Now, but at the same time, right? You can't get both, right, for the same project. I think that's well,
clear. Yeah.
I'm assuming that's right. So,
Mhm.
so we need to make sure that that isn't. Obviously, if you're the group applying for the grant,
Yeah.
you're going to take the largest number you can get. If it's the same number, if you apply for the same number at both of them, which you probably would, because it'd be compared. But if there is a difference in price, right, they're going to be able to pick between the two of them.
Yes.
So
Okay, and the 8, that's the last guiding principle that we have. I think that's a pretty clear thing. If there is any conflict of interest from the members of the proposing team or from committee members, it needs to be reported to the committee lead, and committee members that have any kind of conflict of interest are not allowed to anyway interact on such a proposal. Yeah, so basically, if you are part of
Yeah,
the
they should recuse
team, yeah,
themselves.
or you have been part of the team, or you hold 5% of the team's tokens or something like this, that needs to be known, and then there needs to be basically you have to be stepping aside and don't touch this whole evaluation process of such a proposal, because it will only lead to bad words afterwards. Yeah, so that's the general clause. I think this was also coming already from the bridge fund. Pretty clear thing. Conflict of interests are not. They can happen, but they need to be made public. And if people don't make it public, and later on it is somehow found out, then we will have a problem. We'll have to maybe even think about how we handle such things, especially if it's coming from one of the grant committee members. That's something that we maybe have to define a little bit clearer. Yeah. Amazing. So actually, this was all I had on the agenda today. Do we have any questions in the community? Any comments or something on this whole thing?
Good.
Good. Okay, if not, then I'll ask you to hop into the governance forum, review the 2 posts that are there, the new one. There's also the link to the whole current draft proposal where all these things are together with much more what is already planned around budget, around structure of the committee, about legal entity, about tiers, about all this stuff. Also, JD has made a great Notion page with a lot of questions. And yeah, comment there, comment on the channel wherever you have time. Next meeting will be on Thursday. And Thursday we will meet also at 4 p.m. already, because at 5 p.m. we have our first DeFi education session from Bankless Consulting. And so basically Thursday, normally we are at 5. Now we do it 1 hour earlier. Talk about Shimmer Treasury, Shimmer Community Grants, and then afterwards we will all enjoy the introduction into DeFi from Bankless, all here in this channel. I'm
Cool.
hopping off. I have another meeting, and thanks for all of you to join. If you want to chat on, stay in the channel. I'm just stopping the recording now and hopping off, and see you on Thursday. Thanks a lot,
All right,
everybody.
catch you guys later.